Hello and welcome to another Lightroom in-depth editing tutorial. Today I'm gonna take this raw file and I'm gonna turn it into a picture like this while explaining to you every single step I do from start to the fully edited and fully finished picture. I'm just gonna do a quick intro with where the place is and what settings I used. If you're just interested in the editing, you can just skip forward right to this point. Alright, so this is another photo of the Kerrang on the Isle of Skye in Scotland. Absolutely love this location, and I've already edited a few pictures, one of which is this one, and I've also made a tutorial about this. If you're interested in that, be sure to check the link in the description down below or just click on the screen right now. But as you can see, this is a very different view, a totally different angle, and a kind of a little bit wider. I shot this at ISO 180mm with the Canon 18-55 kit lens and the Canon 600D f8 sharpest aperture with the lens, and it gives me enough depth of field for this scene, and 1/100th of a second shutter speed is just what gave me the correct exposure. This will be a very in-depth and very thorough tutorial, so get your coffee ready. So I'm gonna start here with editing, and the first thing I do with pretty much all of my landscape pictures is just bring up the shadows. It might look a little bit washed out and not really great right now, but I'm doing that so I can bring down the blacks later. For now, let me bring down the highlights. Bring down the highlights, bringing up the shadows. It's just kind of my regular workflow. That way you get a really neutral picture to work with, and you got a lot of detail both in the sky and also in the foreground to work with further. So highlights is definitely a very important thing, as you can see here. Then another thing that I usually do is just bring up the whites while holding down the Alt key. If you hold down the Alt key, you will get the mask, and everything that is black is not clipped, and everything where you see any other color than black means that your whites clip. So you want to make sure that you don't clip anything, usually, unless you're going for a very artistic picture or you're having the sun directly in your frame. Unless you have that, you probably don't want anything clipped. So I've maximized that here to 64 in this case, and that really gives me a lot of dynamic while not clipping anything. So here would be the whites at 0, and here's the white at plus 64. So you can see a ton more dynamic and a ton more interest in the photo. Then the blacks, what I usually do here is bring down the blacks. Sometimes I even bring them up if I, for example, work with a picture of trees with really dark shadows. But for this photo right here, I definitely want to bring that down. And by bringing down the black slider, you get a form of contrast. Now there are tons of different forms of contrast in Lightroom, but what the blacks give you is a really unique and a really beautiful effect of contrast. So for example, you can see here, by bringing down the blacks, I will get something like this, and by bringing up the contrast slider, I will get a much finer contrast that really just affects more of the very dark areas rather than the very light areas. So really love the blacks here, and here you can press down the Alt key as well, and you will get the mask of the blacks. Now everything that is any color other than white means there are clipped blacks. However, I really don't mind clipped blacks. For example, if I don't have any detail right here in these rocks, I really don't even care, and it sometimes can even help to kind of simplify the picture. So I wouldn't really worry about clipping any blacks here. It's really totally different to the whites. So just go with the slider and just stick with whatever looks best. So in this case, I don't really want to go too far with it right now, so I'm just gonna bring it down to around -55. So let me show you, here's blacks at 0 and here's blacks at -55. And I mean, if I show you here the before any editing and the after editing, it's already a huge difference. And these 4 adjustment sliders right here are usually the thing that make the most impact to your photo. But I'm really nowhere near done yet, so let's go to the contrast slider here, and I think I'm gonna bring the contrast slider a little bit to the right. Don't be afraid to go minus contrast. In this photo I don't really like the look, but especially if you work with a sunset picture or maybe a snow picture where you have a very soft and very non-textured picture, you really can sometimes get an even better mood and even a better look by bringing it down. So just play around with it, stick with whatever you like best. That's really no set tactic I have with the contrast slider. Now let's go down here to the clarity sliders. Clarity is pretty much the same as contrast in terms of just play around with it. The effect is very different, but you know, there's no set tactic, just go with whatever you like best. So in this case, I think I will bring it up just a little bit. A thing that I don't like to do with the clarity slider is just to bring it up too much, even though I don't really mind the look and I like it in some parts, it can be a little bit too much at times, and by bringing up the clarity so much you can really end up with some noise in your photo because the very fine textures in the picture get pronounced a little bit too much. So I think I'm gonna stick around plus 20 here. You can always add local clarity to some individual parts of your picture later with these tools up here, which we're going to cover very thoroughly a little bit later. So I think the picture already looks pretty good. A thing that I probably should cover is exposure. Don't be afraid to go minus or plus with the exposure slider if you've messed up the exposure in camera. If you're working with a raw file, you really have a lot of leeway and you can go minus and plus without really hurting the picture too much. Now if you go plus exposure, you will of course always introduce a little bit noise, but since you have a raw file, it's really no big deal. So if you think it's too dark, go plus. If you think it's too bright, go minus. But I think the exposure for this photo is pretty good right here, so I don't have to change anything. Then color temperature can be a very important thing in your photo, and I would suggest you once again just to play around with it. This is definitely a thing where you have a lot of freedom, artistic freedom. You can go very warm or you can go cool with your picture, so you don't really have to neutralize the whites all the time. For example, in my sunset pictures I often like to bring up the temperature so everything looks a little bit warmer, and for example in winter pictures with snow I like to bring it a little bit more to the left, to the blue, so it looks a little bit colder. So you know, I really would not suggest you to neutralize your pictures in landscapes. In portraits and stuff, that's a different story, but in landscapes I would really just go with whatever you like best. So let me see here. Let me see the default. I think it's pretty good how it was actually. I don't think I'm gonna warm up the entire scene here because I really don't like this look very much. I like it on some portions of the grass down here, but in the sky and in some of the other parts of the image I really don't like it. And if I go more towards the blues, it kinda makes the whole picture look too cold. So I think I'm actually just gonna stick with the white balance that I've chosen in camera here. But you know, if you're editing a raw file, you really won't hurt your picture at all, so you can go as much or as little adjustment as you want. But here I really think 6000 works the best. The same thing is true with tint, just go with whatever looks best here as well. The only trick I could give you is if you're editing a sunset, I often like to add a little bit of magenta, but on my regular pictures I really just tend to leave that kind of a default because I really don't like greens in my photos, and in my non-sunset pictures I really rarely add any pink or any magenta, so I'm just gonna leave that at 0 and go to the last slider I'm gonna cover here, the last two sliders, which is Vibrance and Saturation. Here you can of course enhance the look, the saturation of your color, both in the minus and in the plus ways. Now, if you add a lot of contrast in the form of the contrast slider and bring down the black slider, this kinda gives you already a look of vibrance and a very saturated image, so you might not even have to worry about that. But you know, if you want more or less, just don't be shy to play around with this. If you want to choose one of these sliders, I would definitely suggest you to choose Vibrance over Saturation. Saturation I really don't use very much at all, because it adds color way more unnaturally rather than the Vibrance slider. I really like the Vibrance slider for that. That said, I really think we have enough Vibrance and Saturation in this picture already, so I'm not going to change anything there. So let's go down to the tonal curve. By the way, don't worry, these other adjustments won't be quite as important and as in-depth explained as this one right here. You know, I really just wanted to explain everything the most in-depth way I can with this basics adjustments, because that's definitely the tool that gives you the most dramatic impact of your picture. So let's go down here to the tonal curve, and I think that I always like to do here, well, at least in 95% of my images, is to raise the highlight slider here. Now you might ask, why bring up the highlight slider here and bring down the highlight slider in the basics adjustment? Well, reason is these sliders are completely different. The highlight slider down here in the tonal curve really just adjusts the very bright parts of your image, whereas the highlight slider really just adjusts pretty much a very wide range of bright parts in your photo. And by bringing up the highlight slider into tonal curve, which really just affects the very bright parts, you really get so much dynamic out of your picture, and I really like that look. And you might say, well, the sky is a little bit overexposed, don't you think? Yes, the sky is a little bit too bright, but it's very important to know that these tonal curve adjustments, you should never even worry about the exposure. You really should go for the best possible look in terms of dynamic and what you think works best for the picture, because we can always fix the exposure very easily, if just for this guy right here. And I'm actually gonna do that in a second with the graduated filter. But before I do that, let me just play around with these other sliders. There's really no set tactic that I have. Just play around with these and just go with whatever looks best. Once again, don't really worry about exposure, just really go with whatever you think gives the most dynamic or the best possible look that you like. And shadows down here, shadows are kind of like the highlight slider, they really just affect the very dark parts of your picture. So once again, very different to the shadows up here. So let me just finish playing around with these, and I think I am done here. So let me just quickly show you before the tonal curve and after, so you can see it's way more dynamic, and I really like that look. But also the sky is overexposed. Now the sky was overexposed before already, but now it's even brighter, so it's even more of a problem that we have to fix. So fixing the sky is very simple. Let me grab a graduated filter here, reset everything for now, and just drag it over the sky. The thing that you want to look for here is that you have a very soft edge, so all of your adjustments will look very natural. So I'm just gonna pull it over the sky right here. So now everything from this line and above will get affected by these adjustments right here. And of course, if your sky is too bright, just go down in the exposure, and now it will just affect this sky portion right here. So let's see what looks the best here. You don't want to go too dark, otherwise it's kind of a bit too much. So I think around -50, you know, minus a half a stop for the sky works the best. So now we have already so much more detail recovered in the sky from before to after. But you can adjust the sky further with these sliders right here. And the thing that I like to do is bring up the contrast as well as the clarity. Keep in mind, all of these adjustments right here will now just affect the sky. And by bringing up the contrast and clarity for the sky, you really get an even more pronounced look, and you really get a little bit of a harsher, more stormy look. Now, of course, this is a picture where I really like the stormy look, but once again, if you're, for example, editing a snow picture or maybe a sunset, sunrise, where it's a very soft overall mood, you might want to even go minus with these sliders to make everything a little bit more smooth. But if you want to go for a kind of harsh, stormy look, these two sliders, bringing them to the right just for the sky, can be very good. So let me show you once again before the graduated filter and after. So now that we've fixed our exposure for the sky, I can show you the real impact that the highlight slider down here at the tonal curve has. So let me just reset that to 0, and here's bringing it up. You can see it's a very dramatic difference, and it makes everything look so much more dynamic, and I really just love this look. So once again, if you play around with these sliders down here, don't worry about exposure, just go with whatever looks the most dynamic and the best to your eye. And actually a thing that I should cover here as well, since this is a very in-depth tutorial, is point curve. Point curve is a thing that I don't really use on all of my pictures, really rarely in fact, just because the difference isn't that big. But let me just try out these different settings here. This is a very fine sort of contrast, and I sometimes add it if it's a very stormy picture, very rough picture of, for example, rocks and stuff. But here I even think that medium contrast really makes everything look a little bit too harsh, and it brings down the shadows too much, so I'm just gonna leave that linear. But you can definitely play around with that. So now that we're done with the tonal curve, let me go down here to the Giselle Tool, and this is a tool that really has a very small impact to your picture, but I'm gonna cover it regardlessly for this tutorial. So what you have here is the Hue, Saturation and Luminance section with all of these color sliders, and actually I don't even play around with the color sliders directly if I do anything with the Giselle Tool, but what I do is just go first of all to the Hue slider and go here to this little pinpointer, click on it, and then just drag it over a color I want to change. Then once you are over color, just press down your left mouse click and bring up and down your mouse, and that way you will automatically just adjust the color that is actually there. So as you can see here, for example, this color right here consists of yellow and green, and by bringing the pinpointer over the color, Lightroom will automatically decide how much mixture of these two sliders is there in the actual color. So it adjusts color a little bit better than when you're, for example, just here you see green and you just bring down and up the greens. So I really would suggest you just to get this little pinpointer and drag it over color you want to change. And another important thing that I want to mention here is that the Giselle tool, you really don't want to go over very slight differentiations in color. So for example, in this photo, all we pretty much have is green and blues in the sky. So it's not something where you want to go, for example, oh, we have a very different shade of green right here. No, it's just like if you have green in your picture, go in on any green spot, and if you have blue on your picture, go on any blue spot. It's not a tool where you can adjust color super detailed, so just know that. So anyways, I'm gonna adjust the hue first of all right here with the greens, and I definitely don't want to bring it up. It really looks poisonous and not really natural, but I actually think I might bring it down. Now there is a picture where I went really far down with the Hue tool, and as you can see, it really dramatically changes the color if you go that far, and I definitely like the look, but at the end I think I rather want a little bit more of a greenish look. So let's do the same thing with the blues right here and just see if there's anything I like better. Maybe go a little bit plus to get a little bit of a darker blue tone. So let me just show you the before and after for now. and as you can see, really no big difference in 99% of your pictures. This will probably don't have the hugest impact, but once you're done with hue, you just want to go to saturation after, do the exact same thing as you did with hue, grab this little pinpointer down here, drag it over the greens and just see if there's anything you like better. Maybe I'm just gonna bring up the saturation just a hint, and the blues, let's see here. I don't think I want to add any blue saturation, but I might even bring it down a little bit so the sky, the blue cast in the sky goes away a little bit. And lastly, the luminance, once again, exact same thing. And just see, I think I'm gonna bring up the luminance a little bit here in the greens, just so we have an even more dynamic picture. You know, it's really depending on the picture how big of an impact these sliders will have. Generally, they will not have that big of an impact, but this happens to be one of the pictures where it has more impact than many of my others, if that made any sense. So let's quickly go to the blues here in the luminance and finish up the HSL tool. And I don't think I'm going to change anything with the blues here. So let me show you before any HSL tool adjustments, and here's after. So you see it's a little bit of a difference, but not really anything game changing. And you know, quite a lot of times I just leave out the HSL tool entirely just to save a little bit of time. So the next thing that we have here is split toning, and split toning is definitely a thing that I use quite a lot. It's one of my favorite modules, and pretty much what you can do here is add and adjust the color in the highlights or in the shadows. And the best way to do that is just click on this little box right here, and it will open a color palette like this, and you can slide around with these colors and just see what it does. Now from left to right you change the actual color that is added, and from bottom to up you will change the saturation of this color. So I would suggest you to start with a very high saturation just to actually see how the color looks, and to kind of fine-tune the actual color tone if you want to add any. By the way, this is definitely completely optional, and in a lot of the times I don't really add too much of it. But in my sunset pictures, I really love this tool, especially for my sunsets, because I really can add even more color in the highlights in the sky and really make the whole scene even more colorful and more diverse. But in this photo, let me see, the only color that I could imagine to work is in the yellows, and I think I might try that here. So as you can see, way too much saturation, so let me just bring down the saturation here and just see if I want to add a little bit. And I'm not quite sure. In some of my pictures I like to add just a little bit of orange in the highlights down here at the split toning, because I kinda like this look, but for this photo I really don't think it works. So let's actually reset everything here and just not add any highlight split toning. But you know, this is definitely a tool that can have a very big impact, and you definitely want to play around with it at least. And you know, if there's anything you like, just stick with it, and if there is not anything you like, then just reset everything and move on. By the way, shadows down here, obviously you could imagine do the pretty much same thing, just that they add more color in the shadows rather than the highlights. So let's see. So shadows is something that I usually don't play around with as much as the highlights, because obviously it will usually look more natural if you add color in the highlights, since that is where the color naturally is coming from, obviously. But sometimes it can even work to just add a little bit of color in the shadows as well. So let me actually try to yet add a little bit of orange in the shadows, but I really don't think it works here either. So I'm just gonna reset everything, and you know, this happens to be one of the pictures where I really don't like any split tone adjustment, but there are some pictures where it really changes everything, so I definitely would suggest you to play around with these, especially the highlights. And by the way, you might ask, okay, I see that there are multiple options of color, but let's say if I just want to add yellow, why wouldn't I just go to the temperature slider and add more yellows there? Well, thing is that temperature slider really changes the color very evenly, whereas the split toning really tends to favor, bright areas, and it kind of gives you a more natural look of adding color. So it's really completely different, and it's not something you can emulate with the temperature slider, even if you wanted to just add yellow. So let's go down here to the detail tool, and first thing you want to do here is definitely zoom in 1:1 so you actually see the details so you can adjust it better. First thing, sharpening. Sharpening is definitely a thing that I really like to add, usually around 50 to 60. You don't want to do it too much, otherwise it looks completely fake and it over sharpens everything. But adding a little bit of sharpening can often help to make the picture sharper, of course, and this is definitely a thing that you will notice, especially if you print your picture or you're displaying your picture on a large monitor, something like that. So I have a very cheap lens here, the Canon 18-55 kit lens, and it's not really the sharpest lens, but even if you have a very sharp and a very expensive lens, adding some sharpening can really help to get even more out of your pictures in quite a lot of the cases. So once you've added a nice amount of sharpening, you want to zoom back out again and bring the masking slider to the right. Now masking slider is very important. For that you want to hold down the Alt key and you will get a sharpening mask. Now everything that is white is going to be sharpened and everything that is black is not going to be sharpened. So the idea here is that you want to bring the masking slider to the right until you don't really have any of the non-textured surfaces such as water, such as the sky, don't want sharpened selected. So by bringing it to the right, you really just want to make sure that you don't select too much of the sky, for example, because if you add sharpening to the sky, you will really just introduce noise, since there is not really any texture that can be sharpened. So by bringing that to the right, it really reduces noise and really just affects sharpening on the actual places where you want it and where it does something. So just bring that to the right. You don't have to do it perfectly, if something in the sky is still selected, that's not something you can avoid, but just bring it to the right until it probably looks something like this. So I'm just gonna leave that here, and detail and radius sliders, now these will slightly change how your sharpening works and how it looks. However, these two sliders really have such a small impact to your picture that I really don't even bother with them in any of my pictures, so I don't think they're worth to adjust. So we're done with sharpening, and let's go down here to the noise reduction. For that you want to make sure that you're zoomed in 1:1 again, and as the name suggests, by bringing the slider to the right you can get rid of noise in your photo. However, if I bring it to the right, as you can see, the effect is really, it gives you a very plasticky image and it takes away a lot of the texture and the detail of your photo. So if you don't have too much noise, for example in this photo, there's quite a lot of noise, but I really don't think it's that much that we need too much of noise reduction. Maybe just around 10, and by the way, even just 10 or 15 will take away a lot of sharpening and texture, so just be sure to be aware of that. If you have a very noisy picture, you have to add some, but if you have just a little bit of noise, it might be a better option to just not change anything there, because I really don't think that the look of this noise reduction tool is very good. However, because this photo really we've raised the shadows so much, and it's a very dark picture where you see noise a little bit better than in a lot of the cases anyways, I think I am going to add just a little bit of noise reduction to get rid of some of that noise, but you know, it's really a trade-off, and you have to decide for yourself if a little bit of noise and the maximum sharpness is a better option, or the minimum amount of noise and a little bit less of sharpness is the better way. But you know, I really would suggest you, if you just have a little bit of noise, just don't worry about that. It really is not needed. So anyways, I'm gonna go down here to the color noise reduction slider, and this is actually a great tool. I absolutely love this slider. I think a lot of people don't even play around with this slider and don't even really know what it does, but it can have an absolutely huge impact to your picture. So let me just bring that to the right to around 80, and I'm not quite sure if you will be able to see that very well on YouTube after video compression and stuff, but let me just show you once again. Here is before and here's after. So what this does is get rid of the purple and green sensor noise in your picture, and as a result it will make your picture look so much cleaner. It really is an amazing tool, and it really doesn't have any negative impact even on your color. So really love that tool. Once again, here at 25 and here at around 80, and I mean, it looks so much cleaner. All of that green and purple sensor noise is just gone, and I really love this effect. I love this slider, and you should definitely take advantage of it. So let me quickly show you the before and after. Before, detail tool adjustments, and here is after. So you see, it's a really big difference, and I really like what it does. It won't matter as much if you're just sharing your pictures on Facebook or whatever, but if you're actually printing your picture, or you know, displaying it on a large monitor or anything like that, it will really have a very big impact. So let's go down here to the lens corrections, and this is a very simple tool. Thing I do here is just go to profile, enable profile corrections, and then you just want to choose your lens, and what this will do is get rid of vignetting as well as distortion. So let me show you before and after. Now, distortion removing is a great thing in pretty much all of my pictures. I haven't really found a photo where it looks better without the distortion removed, but vignetting removed can sometimes even look better if you bring that down to 0 again, at least in my opinion, because I really like actually the look of vignetting. But you know, this is definitely something you have to decide for yourself. But here I think I'm gonna bring down the vignetting to 0 again. So really the main thing you wanna look for in this photo is the distortion removing, and once again, before, after, definitely a great thing. And the second and last thing you want to do here in lens corrections is just go to color, remove chromatic aberration, and you're pretty much done. Chromatic aberration removing will just get rid of the purple and green fringing on the high contrast edges. For example, here you should see some without, so let me quickly take that off. And as you can see, you see this very greenish and also orangish line right here, and just by pressing here it will get rid of it. It will make the picture look a lot cleaner, and I really like that tool. Super easy, just click on it and it's pretty much done. And as we were speaking of vignetting before, down here at effects, the only thing you pretty much can do here is vignetting, and if you want to add vignetting, definitely go into the minus, don't go into the plus, makes your picture look terrible. But sometimes I like to add actually minus vignetting. That really can help to give you more attention towards the center and to kind of make your viewer's eye go towards the center rather than the edges. And I really like the look on quite a lot of my pictures, especially very stormy and very dark and dramatic pictures. So I am going to bring that down a little bit here. You can also play around with the midpoint and maybe even bring that more towards the center, so your effective area of vignetting will get bigger. but you know, all of these other sliders really have such a small impact that I usually don't even play around with them. So let's just see before adding vignetting and after adding vignetting. I mean, it's definitely completely up to you, completely optional if you want that, but I think it can be a very powerful tool to really set the mood for your picture. And I guess while I'm at it, I should cover grain as well. I mean, grain, you can add grain, make your picture look terrible. Really would not suggest you to use grain. Really, no single picture that I've ever edited looked good with grain, so just ignore that. And about 2 light years after starting this tutorial, we're now finally at the last global adjustment, which is the camera calibration. And if you're still watching even, that's like a miracle, and I do appreciate that a lot. So here you have pretty much two different things, which is the primary color sliders and the profile. Now profile, I would just suggest you to play around with this and just go through every single option, and what this will do is change pretty much the overall look of your photo. You know, it will change the color a little bit, the vibrance a little bit, as well as the contrast. So you know, just play around with these, really no set tactic. Once again, just go with whatever you like best, but it's definitely, I think, worthy to play around with. So I like that look right here. Let's see the Adobe standard. This is what we've started with. And camera landscape, this can really be sometimes kind of difficult to choose because there are so many good options. But camera standard, I really like this look. Actually, it kind of works for the overall mood of the picture, because I really like the color and it makes everything look a little bit darker. So Adobe standard, let's see, camera landscape once again. I think camera landscape is a little bit too much here. So ultimately, I think I'm gonna go with camera standard. So as you can see, here's the difference between Adobe standard, which is the one we started with, and camera standard. Really just changes your photo, and I like the overall look a little bit better. Then down here at the primary color sliders, these don't really have that big of an impact compared to the profile, but if you have the time, definitely be sure to play around with these. But you know, if you don't have the time, you can just skip these and just move on. You know, I even leave them out quite a lot of the times. But because this is a super in-depth tutorial, I of course also want to make sure that I play around with these. So let's get started here. All of these sliders, really no set tactic. Just go with whatever looks best. Go into minus and plus with each respective slider and just stick with whatever looks best. Now this is a very CPU intensive task, and because I'm additionally to that recording my screen, it might lag a little bit, so I apologize for that. But let me just play around with these other sliders right here. And I mean, there's really not much to explain here. Just once again, go with whatever looks the best. Maybe bringing up the saturation here just a tiny bit. And lastly, the blue primary. Let's see here, bringing that one just around +1, maybe a little bit plus as well. So I'm done here. Here would be before any adjustments down here, and really the main difference you see is the profile change before and after. Once again, if I would for example bring this to Adobe standard, which is what we started with, the difference between before and after would be pretty negligible and very difficult to even see. So that's why I said, if you don't want to play around with these sliders and you don't have the time, you can very easily just leave them out. Anyways, I am done with the global adjustments, so let's go up here to the local adjustments. And the local adjustments really is where the fun part is. And first thing I like to at least try out is grab a graduated filter and just drag one very harsh, very small graduated filter over the bottom of the photo and then try to bring down the exposure. Now that way you can sometimes add a little bit of more vignetting, of course, and you get to a sense of closing out the picture, and that can work quite well for quite a lot of the pictures. So in this photo I think it works pretty well. Then let me grab another one and do the exact same thing for the top part for this guy here, and also bring down the exposure. And I really like that look here. I think it works great for this photo. So let me just quickly go into the history so I can show you the difference. Here's before adding these two graduated filters, and here's after. Really just adds a little bit more vignetting, a very specific type of vignetting, and really it helps you to close out the picture. And you know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but here I really think it works really well. So another thing that I've noticed is that this guy really is a little bit too blue for my taste. So instead of, you know, just bringing down the vibrance for the entire picture, I don't want to do that because that would also affect the entire foreground. So instead I'm just going to the filter that we created at the very start, that where we fixed the exposure for this guy, and I'm going to go into the saturation here in this graduated filter. In case your exposure was fine before and you don't have one of those, you know, just drag a graduated filter over the sky right here and just adjust it that way. But because I already added a graduated filter for the entire sky here, I just can go to this one, go to the saturation and bring that down a little bit. So now the blues are a little bit less prominent compared to here before and after, and I think that looks better. So I really start to like this picture, and we really start to fine-tune this picture. So let me see. Another thing that you can try out is to grab another graduated filter and amplify the lighting of your photo and kind of exaggerate the lighting. So for example, if you have your sun over here, your light, everything, your sun is coming from over here, you can grab a graduated filter, just drag it over the entire pretty much right portion of your image, and just want to make sure that you have a very soft edge, and then bring up the exposure a little bit and grab another one and bring it over the left part where, you know, the lighting source is quite far away, and go a little bit minus with the exposure, and that way you really can get a lot of dynamic and really exaggerate the lighting scheme of your photo. And let's just show you here. Here would be before that lighting adjustment, and here is after. So you see, it's just a little bit more interesting, and I really like that effect. It's something that I use in quite a lot of my pictures. So even though that we don't really have a light source in the very corner, it kinda is right here, so it's still sort of in the top right corner of the image. So I'm actually just gonna leave that right here, you know, these two sliders of plus and negative exposure, and I really think that looks pretty good. Once again, here is before and here's after. Really just the whole idea of it is to exaggerate the lighting. I think I start to repeat myself, sorry for that, it's getting kind of late. So I think I'm pretty much done with my graduated filter game for this photo, and I mean, I'm pretty much done with the entire picture. The only thing, and the very important thing that I want to do here, is add dodge and burning. Now, if you don't have any idea of dodge and burning, you can just click this tutorial right here about dodge and burning, which will explain you everything about it very thoroughly, and it will open in a new tab, and you can go watch that and come back after. But, you know, in a nutshell, it's just making individual parts of your picture darker or brighter, and that way you really can complexify your light. You can make your whole lighting scheme a lot more interesting. So the way you do that is by either grabbing the radial filter or the adjustment brush. You really can go with either one, but personally I really like the radial filter a lot for dodge and burning because it gives you a lot of flexibility. So once you are in the radial filter tool, you want to make sure that your feather is at 100 and that you invert the mask. That is really important, so all of your adjustment will look very natural. And then once you have that, you just kind of want to drag some lip shapes, radial filters over your scene, and then once you have that, just either add plus or negative exposure. I'm gonna start off by adding plus exposure here. The important thing to do here is to not overdo the adjustment, so you don't want to add so much or reduce so much exposure that it starts to become unnatural. You really just want to add a little bit. And by the way, you can also mix these with clarity or contrast. If I go plus exposure, I like to bring up the clarity quite a lot of times, and the color is also a thing that you can adjust. You know, you can bring a little bit of color in your picture. That is something that I usually just do with sunset pictures, you know, where I really just wanted to get even more shades of color in my photo. But for my regular pictures, just like this one, I really don't think it's needed. So then the idea is you just want to drag around these radial filters and, you know, kind of make all of these very small areas that are kind of evenly lit and maybe a little bit flat and a little bit boring a little bit more interesting. So for example, we have this patch of grass right here and it's kind of evenly lit. You know, there is not super much interest in it, so I'm just gonna drag a radial filter over here and, you know, just see if it works, maybe adjust the size and the angle of it. And I think that works pretty well here. Maybe bring up the exposure even a little bit more and, you know, just fine tune these adjustments. And then once you're done with one, you can just right click duplicate and drag it over another area of your photo. And if that's a little bit too much exposure, you can individually then adjust your settings right for this, just this very radial filter. Right click duplicate again, maybe one more over here, make this whole path right there a little bit more interesting. You know, this really is a thing that takes a little bit of time, and once you get to know the effects of dodge and burning, you will get a little bit faster. But at first you really have to try it out and really see what it does for yourself. So, you know, this would be something that I usually jump and skip in my video tutorials, but since this is a super raw video tutorial where I show you everything live and uncut, I am going to do the dodge and burning adjustments on screen as well without any skipping or anything. So this really can take a little bit of time. And let's see, maybe one more over here. You know, you really have to adjust your exposure. Some parts need a little bit more exposure, some parts need a little bit less exposure. Then maybe a very small one over here. And by the way, a thing that you have to note is that the actual area of your adjustment is a little bit smaller than your actual filter. So if I, for example, go like -1 stop here, you see the actual negative exposure really is only visible in the very center of the radial filter. So, you know, that's something you will get the feel for once you use the tool for quite a lot of times. So maybe one more over here, really a small one. And I mean, how much you want to do that and how crazy you want to go with it is definitely up to you. Sometimes I even go in 1:1 and, you know, just add some very small filters. But I kind of want to keep this video relatively short. Well, short, it's probably 1 hour already, but, you know, don't want to make it longer than it has to. So let me just do one more over here. This one right here needs a little bit less exposure. Right click duplicate again. Maybe add a little bit of plus exposure over here. right click, duplicate, a very small one right here. Very important that you change up the sizes and adjust the exposure and the settings according to the actual scene. And I think I am pretty good with plus exposure radial filters. Actually, maybe one more over here and increase the exposure as well. So I think, yeah, I think I'm good with the plus exposure, but now I want to add a new one and add some minus exposure radial filters and bring down the exposure. And sometimes I like to mix it with contrast, so let's do that right here. And let's just drag one over here, right click, duplicate. And the basic idea of this is to bring a little bit of negative exposure radial filters in between these plus exposure filters, and really create even more dynamic, even more differentiation in terms of exposure in your whole picture. For example, even though we've added some plus exposure filters over here in this area, it still might be a little bit too flat, so you can exaggerate the contrast by bringing a negative exposure radial filter here in the middle, and of course adjust it accordingly. Maybe another one over here, just right click, duplicate, one more over here, maybe a pretty big one actually on this right portion, and maybe even go more into the darks. I know I'm keep repeating myself. I really am just trying to kinda skip some time, because this really isn't a task where I can say much about the actual technique, since it's really different for every photo. Right click, duplicate here, maybe bring one in between these two right here as well. And I really like that look. Then it's always a good idea to kind of zoom out and see if there is any part that still looks kind of boring, and then maybe bring another one over here, adjust it so it looks actually good, bring it down even further, then maybe duplicate again and just make this top, this peak of this hill right here, kind of darker into contrast to the lower plus exposure, and bring down the exposure, right click, duplicate, maybe in between right here, one more over there, even go a little bit further with this one, and I think I am pretty much done here. Now once again, you really can go crazy with it. You can even zoom in 1:1 and just add very small ones, but I really think I've already been recording way too long. If you've made it to this point, it's really a miracle, and you, sir, you are a photography nerd, which is great. But actually a last thing that I'm gonna do is just go to the filters, where I've added a little bit too much maybe, and just dial down the exposure a little bit. Maybe this one over here is a little bit too much as well, and maybe this one could use a little bit less as well. So let me see the before and after of these radial filters, of this dodge and burning. And at first it might look very obvious to you, if you see the side-by-side comparison, but once you will look at it for a little bit of a longer period of time, it really will start to look completely natural, and the additional dynamic and complexification of your lighting will really look great, and it will really enhance your picture and bring it to the next level. So once again, here's before any dodge and burning, and here's after. So the idea here really is to complexify the light without making it obvious, and without your viewer even noticing that you've done so. And the very last and very quick thing that I wanted to mention as well is the spot removal tool. Once I'm done with all of my editing and all of my adjustments, I usually go to the spot removal tool, I zoom in 1:1 to the sky, and that just go through the whole sky, whole picture pretty much, and see if there are any dust or dirt spots, and just remove them if there are any. Definitely a thing that you want to do, especially if you print your picture. You know, you don't want to have some stupid dirt spot in your photo that really ruins everything. So, you know, just take the time. But, you know, that's really should be self-explanatory how it works. Just zoom in 1:1, and if there is a dust or dirt spot, just remove it. But anyways, I think I am really done here. Really a super long tutorial. Once again, thank you very much if you've made it this far. Here is before any adjustments, and I mean completely different picture. This is just a raw file, very flat, very dark, and compared to this, it really is a world of difference. And a very important thing to note is that first of all, you know, you will see that they're direct before and after comparison, so it will always look a little bit more dramatic than it actually is once you know, upload your picture and you view it separately without having the direct comparison. But if that is still a little bit too much adjustment, you know, you could always dial back the adjustments a little bit and don't go quite as far as I have done. I really just like this editing style of making a very vibrant and a very in-your-face picture, so to say. So once again, to the left is the before and to the right is after. And I might even dial back some of these radial filters right here really quickly. And yeah, I think that is actually just one. So thank you so much for watching and bearing with me through this 1 hour tutorial. I really do appreciate that, and if you enjoyed this video and if you've learned anything, please be sure to leave me a thumbs up. That really helps me out a ton, is hugely appreciated, and it really helps me to see what videos you actually like. And if you did not like the video and if you did not learn anything from it, please be sure to dislike the video, so once again I can see what you actually like and so I can actually improve my videos in the future. And of course, if you would like to see more videos just like this one, other Lightroom tutorials, other Lightroom edits, all kind of photography related stuff, please be sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video again. I am currently uploading one photography related video every single day of the week. So once again, thank you very much for watching. By the way, if you have any comments or questions, be sure to leave them in the comment section down below. I definitely appreciate all sorts of feedback and would be more than happy to answer any of your questions. So it's really time to sign out now. I really hope you could take away some tips or techniques of this video to actually use in your own editing. And once again, thank you very much for watching. I want to wish you a great day, great pictures, and of course, take care.